One of the most troubling times in some men's lives is the moment they realize the toll pornography is taking on their well-being. Personally, I quit pornography at a time when the resources available today were virtually non-existent, and identifying all the symptoms of my addiction took many, many years. Today, there are hundreds of resources out there that will educate you on possible porn addiction symptoms. But as a man who sadly spent a great part of his life addicted to pornography, I've experienced literally all of them. This tip is my attempt to help those of you out there watching who are still not sure of your relationship with porn. If you're not sure whether you're dealing with a bad porn habit or an actual full-blown addiction, going through these 10 symptoms will help you figure out how deep you currently are. Symptoms on their own do not necessarily mean that you're addicted to porn, but experiencing several of those listed below and that I'm going to talk about should be a source of serious concern for you. Understanding all the symptoms of your porn addiction is absolutely crucial to quitting. The first would be loss of concentration. Now, personally, this was the most debilitating effect of porn addiction for me. If you've been experiencing an acute inability to focus on a task for long periods of time, increased ADHD symptoms, and zoning out constantly, especially when you never experience them at this level of severity, you're most likely experiencing one of the symptoms of porn addiction. The loss in concentration can wreak havoc on your career and your skills, especially if your work requires long bouts of uninterrupted concentration. Years ago, I used to write daily for up to 5 hours at a stretch. When my porn addiction was at its height, my writing deteriorated so much that I quit my daily writing habit. It was just too hard to sit uninterrupted for an hour. The second is depression. Depression is a common all-round symptom for all porn users. The funny thing is that you don't even realize that those sudden, random, unexplained, extreme drops in your mood are not normal. I always assumed my depression was due to some other aspect of my life. My lack of success with women, maybe below average performance at work or school, or something that happened in my childhood. As the days of no porn turned into weeks and eventually months, that dark cloud of depression which followed me everywhere slowly lifted, till one day I realized that I was just fine. No depression or deep sadness. I was back to what I could only describe as normal. The third is lack of romance. Now, exposure to pornography inevitably increases how attractive you find your partner if you have one. Studies have shown that men and women feel less intimacy, less of a desire to perform sexually, and loss of affection after frequent exposure to pornography. Contrary to the popular belief that porn helps relationships, continued use of pornography torpedoes your intimate relationships. If you are in your head all the time while having sex, there's no room for any sort of emotional connection, which forms the basis of intimate relationships. The fourth is lack of achievement. Now, I honestly didn't achieve anything when I was hooked on porn. I worked my butt off for years, and while I had modest, average results, there was nothing in my life that I truly excelled in. During the following months when I was completely off pornography, I achieved more than I had in several years, literally in all aspects of my life. My productivity was amazing, my business expanded rapidly, as did my interpersonal skills and even my spiritual growth. The fifth is low energy. The difference between energy levels when you are on and off porn is like night and day. Off pornography, I'm able to put in 18-hour workdays, including 2 to 3 hours at the gym, every day. To avoid the risk of, sounding like a drug ad, I'll say this. Low energy can be due to many things: an underlying illness, adrenal fatigue, bad sleep cycles, and so on. However, if you've made it up to this particular symptom, you probably suspect that you may have a porn problem, and low energy is common across the board for all porn addicts, especially if you use stimulants, Red Bull, coffee, Monster, and so on, several times a day to stay sharp. Sixth is erectile dysfunction, the most dreaded of all symptoms. The inability to get it up during sex is one of the most emasculating and disturbing experiences a healthy man can experience. Erectile dysfunction, or ED as we'll call it from this point on, these days is much more prevalent among teenagers and men in their early to mid-20s. Most older men's first exposure to porn was through magazines and catalogs and whatnot. With the advent of high-speed internet connections, many young men are experiencing ED much earlier in life. The seventh is premature ejaculation. Ejaculating too soon is usually due to training your brain over and over again to do so quickly or before you're fully erect. This usually starts when you're young, with limited opportunities to masturbate. As a result, masturbation is quick. Fast forward a few years later, and it's become a debilitating habit that now shows up in your sexual encounters. And of course, all of this was due to quick masturbating while you were watching porn as a teen. Eighth, unusual porn fetishes. As any guy who has watched porn for a long time knows, it is fairly normal to progress from one genre to another genre of porn as your brain develops tolerance to your usual porn genre. Straight porn becomes boring, so you try lesbian, then interracial, transgender, and on and on. The shock and excitement of taboo sex causes you to orgasm. Unfortunately, each time you orgasm to one of these fetishes, you send a signal to your brain that says, hey, this feels good. It's okay. I'm totally cool with getting off on this. The most important thing I have to say here is this. The kind of pornography you masturbate to is not an indicator of your sexual orientation. That's for those of you who are out there worried about this. I know not many people address it. If you spend most of your life watching heterosexual pornography, then gradually switching to homosexual pornography does not make you gay or in the closet. Now, I've spoken personally to many gay men who, through repeated exposure to pornography, began developing sexual attraction to females. This goes both ways, and it's called homosexual obsessive compulsive disorder, or HOCD. It describes an obsession with one's sexuality, a persistent fear that you may have a different sexual orientation. Many men suffer from this in silence, especially many men who are addicted to pornography. Just remember this, you're not gay. More importantly, if you're struggling with this, I recommend seeking help from a licensed professional. 9. No attraction to real-life partners. Personally, this was the biggest indicator of a porn problem for me. As my porn use escalated, I completely lost all sexual interest in my partner at the time. I still masturbated to porn, but I was simply not interested in sex with that particular real-life woman. These days, when I work with men on certain skills, especially their dating skills, one of the tells that a guy might be addicted to pornography is having a ridiculously high standard when it comes to women, especially when he barely had any skills with women in the first place and has few to no sexual partners. 10. Loss of ability to orgasm during sex. Now this truly sucks. Experiencing a loss of ability to orgasm is usually a precursor to erectile dysfunction. There are several things that occur during the onset of this symptom, such as a decrease in the sensitivity of your penis, a sharp decline in sexual arousal with your regular sexual partners, development of strange fetishes, and probably the most common, the need to fantasize or imagine porn scenarios to maintain your erection. In the section below, I'd like you to share with us what are some of the other symptoms of porn addiction that you've experienced.